We're going to start off, actually, we'll have to, we normally don't have the invocation for workshop days, but we have one. Do we have I have a note here that Reverend Donna Glotry is here. Is she here for the invocation? Because if there is someone here to be here for the invocation, then I definitely will permit it. If not, all right, just making sure that today isn't a different day. Madam Clerk.
Approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 18th, 2022.
Has every member had a chance to review the minutes, and if so, is there any discussion? If there is no discussion, then I will make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items 1 through 7.
Has every member had a chance to review the consent agenda, and if so, is there any discussion? Councilmember Ballard.
I'd like to talk about item number 3, or make a motion to talk about item number 3.
So we can pull item number 3, and then we'll talk about it following the rest of the consent agenda. So item number 3 has been pulled. Is there any more discussion about the other items on the agenda? If there is no further discussion, I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda, items 1 through 7, with the exception of item 3. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. We're now on item number 3. Councilmember Ballard has the floor to talk about item number 3.
I had asked staff a whole long list of questions just about why it wasn't put up for bid, and I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it.
I'm going to ask Don Henry
Sure.
to address the issue.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Don Henry, Public Works and Utilities. To the specific question on why this exigency item was not bid out, this is relative to a project that's already in process that was bid out. PEC was hired through a competitive process to provide the modeling and preliminary design for replacement of a number of valves that control flow from Hess Pump Station between Hess and treatment and the underground storage areas and into the distribution system. Through the progression of that preliminary design, one of the important aspects to consider is what order those valves get replaced in. And through that modeling and that sequencing, it was found that there's 3 valves that are in question as to whether they function or not. And the timing of those valves is critical to tying in the new water treatment plant into that plumbing system. And so because of the timing and the exigent circumstance, there wasn't time to go through the regular procurement process. And on top of that, because of the work that PEC had already done and the knowledge that they have of the system, it made sense to move forward with them under exigency.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? If there is no further discussion or motions, then I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to affirm and ratify the city manager's public exigency approval of the water treatment plant treatment process controls modifications, approve the contract, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated January 24th, 2022.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Hannah Lang, Department of Finance. First engineering bid we have is Stryker Sports Phase 8, locker room and press box expansion, deferred to January 31st Board of Bids. WTP and Hess Pump Station switchgear preventative maintenance, P1 Group for $206,115. Lead paint abatement, recommendations is Arambula Construction for groups 1 and 4, and S&A Construction for groups 2 and 3. Emergency pump repair at Auburn Hills Golf Course, Charles Sargent Irrigation for $53,983.35. Cameras, Broadway Corridor, 21st and Broadway to MacArthur, Sandifer Engineering and Controls for $124,728.59. Skeeter Brush Fire Rescue Apparatus, Conrad Fire Equipment for $293,198.16. This is our purchasing procurement website, and here's a list of our open requests for proposals. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Hannah, could I maybe ask a question?
Questions for staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Vice Mayor, the floor is yours.
Pardon me, I'm sorry. I forget we're in workshop and it's not, we're not casual yet, so pardon me, no disrespect meant at all. But I was curious about Stryker, and I don't know if maybe Gary needs to answer, but it said it was deferred. I know we were just on a timeline and wanting to make sure that we accommodate the schedule, so I was just curious.
I'll let Gary answer that.
No, you're fine.
Mayor and council members, Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. We, in fact, just had a call this morning with our designers. Assistant City Manager Rigby was on the call. And so the bid went over as we expected it might. It went over a little bit more than we thought. Prices right now are really unpredictable. You've all heard that. And so what we're doing right now, even this morning and today, is we're going to work with purchasing and see. The way we set up the bid was 3 different pieces with our locker rooms and the press box. Anyway, we're trying to see if there's a way that we might still be able to maximize the amount of work we get done. So we've got staff going to talk to the contractor this morning and see if they're willing to do something a little bit different. We have to be careful how we do that with fairness in bidding, but we'll have more information by the end of today. We've got an item set to go to the council right now on February 8th, assuming we can work this out, that would approve moving forward with some level of work. But the best I can tell you is we'll know more here in the next day or two.
Okay, thank you so much.
So I just got a text message from someone watching this on YouTube, and apparently we don't have audio. Can we get, I guess, tech to check to make sure that we do have audio so we can continue while still being transparent?
They're working on that, Mayor.
Are they gonna report back to us when it's,
Do we want to have a talent show in the meantime while we're waiting?
I responded to this person and told him to unplug his PC and plug it back in. So let's go ahead and just. Okay.
So
Our tech person just stated that we are working on the audio for YouTube. However, we are still live on Channel 7, and Channel 7 is working without any issues. Therefore, for folks who might be watching on YouTube, if you have Channel 7, if you switch over to Channel 7, then you'll be able to watch this without any concerns with the audio at this point. So with that, we'll continue. Yes, of course.
I have a question about the open RFP. I received an email and phone call from Mr. Charles McAfee regarding the Brewer Center, and they stated that they were told they were signed up in our system, but never received notification of the RFP in order to bid. And wanted to know what happened with that. I did try to connect them back with our purchasing department, but see if that opportunity is gone.
That RFP did open, but I do have staff getting in touch with them to see, they are in our system, so I'm not sure why they didn't receive the solicitation, but we are working on it to see what we can figure out, to see how we can make sure that they get solicitations in the future, as well as figure out the RFP if staff is willing to extend the opening date or how we're going to handle that. So we'll have staff circle back around with that. Uh-huh.
Is there further discussion? Also, if staff could assist with possibly replacing Councilmember Johnson's microphone, that would be helpful. I'm not sure if it's on or working well, but I know that we want to make sure his questions come through loud and clear during the workshop. Is there further discussion on this item? If there is no further discussion, then I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the new petitions and budgets, adopt the new resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Decisions for public improvements.
Mayor and council members, Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The two petitions for your consideration today represent 100% of the improvement district for each, and all petitions are valid per Kansas statute. Cooper Creek Addition in District 5 will provide water and paving improvements required for new residential development. So those are petitions for water and paving. And that's all we have today. So staff recommends City Council approve the new petitions and budgets, adopt the amending resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Are there questions on this item? Discussion. If there is none, then I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the new petitions and budgets, adopt the new resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Just for clarification, and if there's no objection, I'd like to go back to the previous item and make the proper motion to pass the Board of Bids and Contracts as the recommended action, in which I read was actually for the petitions for public improvements. So just for the sake of being proper, I will, if there's no objection, go back to Board of Bids and Contracts, and I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to receive and file a report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Approval of travel for Mayor Whipple, Vice Mayor Tuttle, and council members Ballard, Blueboff, Idaho, Heisel, and Johnson to attend the local government day, January 26th through 27th, 2022, Topeka, Kansas.
All right, is there any discussion on this item?
Is it one-way or round trip?
I was waiting for that one. Yeah.
And Councilmember Frey, is he going with us?
Yes. Is it? And just for folks who might not know, this is to attend the Kansas League of Cities Conference, and then also to help talk about the priorities of our legislative agenda with our, not only our delegation from South Central Kansas, but also other members of the legislature. So that normally we do this trip every year. Of course, COVID has gotten in the way, but that is what this item, a fair description of this item. So is there any further discussion on this? Mike, are you able to set up a meeting with Representative Hoheisel? And
I don't necessarily feel like that is important to our mission to speak with Representative Hoheisel any more than we have to.
well, very good. So with that, I'll make the motion to approve the travel.
Second.
Motion has been made and then seconded. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Council member appointments and comments.
All right. Appointments. I would like to appoint Vice Mayor Tuttle to the Arts Council. Is there any other appointments? If there are no other appointments, then I will make a motion to approve Vice Mayor Tuttle's appointment to the Art Council.
Second.
Which has been seconded. All in favor of said motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. We're back on comments. Is there any comments? If there are none, then I will make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor of adjournment, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. So we are, just for the new folks who this might be your first workshop, we usually run these a little less formal. So feel free to, when it's appropriate, to just speak up and ask questions, and just the goal is to keep the conversation going. So don't feel you have to get the attention of the chair to get the floor. Usually these are a little more free-flowing. So welcome to your first council workshop. And with that, Bob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a rare opportunity to be able to advance one of the council's initiatives, and that is to increase the availability of affordable housing here in Wichita. And that unique opportunity is provided through ARPA, and the council's tentatively allocated $5 million for an affordable housing fund. But when you approve the concept, we didn't have a lot of details available for you. There has been a task force that has been working on providing recommendations to the council on how to create an affordable housing fund and move forward. We have had a staff team working on it, along with Development Strategies, a firm that you've had exposure to before as part of the Places for People plan and its implementation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the staff team to go through the recommendations, start with some of the information that was shared with the task force, and then talk to you about the task force recommendations. With that, I'll turn it over to Andy Feaster with Development Strategies. By the way, this is really exciting. I mean, hang in there with us, but I mean, this is a rare opportunity. And you're also going to hear about how we're trying to blend this with the Housing Trust Fund as well, with the land bank. And so it's a two-pronged strategy.
May the clerk note that the manager is excited about this. As I've going on 3 years, I haven't seen him excited very often, and I feel that this should go down for prosperity. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Good morning. As City Manager mentioned, my name is Andy Feaster with Development Strategies, and Justin Carney is joining us virtually from St. Louis. And it has been my pleasure to work with the city and the advisory committee on discussing, how to focus these funds and provide the best impact for the community. What I want to talk to you about really is three key things. Remind us all why we're here and talking about affordable housing and reinvesting in our core neighborhoods. I wanted to summarize some key elements of the study, providing an example of how this might look as a focused initiative to support neighborhood redevelopment while providing quality affordable housing, and then summarize the recommendation. And then Sally will follow with some more specifics about how she and the city staff would like to move forward with implementing this recommendation. So why are we here? City manager provided a good summary. ARPA funds is enabling us to have this conversation. This Affordable Housing Fund has been an effective tool in a lot of cities across the country to supplement the limited resources we get from the state and federal government to provide affordable housing, which is in great need. We want to do it well, but learn from those best practices and figure out what will work here. And how did we get here? There's a few topics of conversation that we talked about in March when I presented to council thinking about, infill development. Part of this is addressing and hoping to kind of change the course of the core neighborhoods and the minority community, specifically African Americans who were adversely impacted by historic policies like redlining and a number of other subsequent actions. We also talked about the impact of, what does it take to do new housing development in the core area? Real quickly on the left here is the cost of constructing a new single-family unit. This cost is probably too low now. This is from earlier this year. And on the right is value. So the market value is less than the cost, and there's a gap. And one of the considerations is what other incentives could we put forth to help support construction? You can see a lot of times a building permit fee waivers asked for. That really doesn't move the needle. So we need a different approach. An affordable housing fund helps fill that gap more directly and more simply. We also are here, ARPA funds are to help with COVID recovery. The pandemic has created or made worse a lot of housing challenges people are facing in our community and across the country. As of July of last year, 13% of renters in Wichita were behind on rent, and through Sally's department implementing the emergency rent relief, the average household had $6,000 in back rent owed. So, keeping people in their homes and that stability of having shelter has been very important.
Andy?
Yes.
Sorry, is that 18% adult renters national number?
Yes, nationally. The
Thank you.
left two stats are national trends, yes.
Thank you.
And so to help address these challenges and focus what we can do with the ARPA funds, we had the advisory committee. And what we did, we had 4 facilitated conversations, very good, very challenging conversations. We talked about some best practices. We provided a couple of memos with background information on what is the affordable housing need, why are we doing this, and also a memo summarizing all the recommendations and what led to those recommendations. And our advisory committee members, I really enjoyed working with this group. We had great conversation, but we had a diverse range of perspectives, and that was really good, and I think led to really strong recommendation and path forward. And one of the things that emerged as we worked on this is that, yes, we have the ARPA funds, but the Housing Authority has a portfolio of single-family homes, the public housing units that have been kind of in limbo for a little bit, and working on trying to return those to the market, fix up and fill the vacant homes. And we thought about how can we leverage these as part of the strategy for affordable housing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but this has become an integral aspect of the recommendation that the advisory committee put forth. And so we'd like to start the conversation by framing the need. What is affordable housing? It is a word that we get asked about in a lot of our engagements, like how do we define affordable? The general base definition is from HUD that affordable housing is when a household's not paying more than 30% of their gross income on housing costs. So that's the housing cost, rent or mortgage, and utilities. And we like to make this even a little bit more straightforward. What does it take to afford a safe and decent two-bedroom home in Wichita? Safe and decent means there's no health and safety issues, so no peeling paint. The systems are working as they should. There's no structural issues. To afford this without being cost burdened, without paying more than 30% of your income toward housing, would take $17 an hour or $34,000 a year. And you can start to see why this is challenging for some. A lot of the entry-level jobs in our region, advertised, I've checked recently, are like $8 to $14 an hour. And if, somebody's working at the minimum wage, it would take 118 hours a week to afford that unit and not be cost burdened. And so that's why you see a lot of households working 2 or 3 jobs. And it's particularly challenging for single parent households. And another really key aspect, this ties back to thinking about redlining and equity in the housing policy, is African American households are disproportionately impacted by housing challenges in our community. And so, what is the need? This is a very big number, and I want to be very clear about what it means. There's an estimated gap of 44,000 dedicated affordable housing units. And what this means is there's about 51,000 households in Wichita who qualify for affordable housing based on their income. That's housing affordable at 60% of the median income or below. We have 7,000 units that are dedicated affordable housing, meaning they're tax credit units, Section 8 vouchers, public housing units, etc. So there's a land use restriction that keeps them affordable for the long term. Rest of the households are finding units on the open market. A share of these are perfectly quality units, but this number represents households who are cost burdened. They're paying more than 30% of their income, so they're having to make choices about transportation, food, etc. And then there are poor quality units, particularly in our core neighborhoods where maintenance has been a challenge over the years for a number of reasons. And so that's really the background of what is affordable in Wichita, what are we talking about here. The next section that really started to inform and focus our discussion and talk about the trade-offs of different approaches is thinking about how far would $5 million go for different types of housing. If we focused on new single family on the vacant lots, that's 70 units versus a renovation strategy where you might get 200 units because of the efficiency or the amount of gap needed to support that approach. Ultimately, a mix is what's needed to provide flexibility, but this really frames what can we accomplish here? And while the need is greater than these numbers here, keep in mind that any new affordable units is a victory, is something that helps households in Wichita. So we need to start somewhere, and this is why this is such an important and exciting opportunity. But to provide a more specific example of how this would work, we did a few kind of pilot project examples where we did the math of what it would cost versus the value and what that gap would be. We looked at 3 different examples here. I'm going to focus on the North Minnesota one. We looked at a multifamily one as well, and the hypothetical on the stadium site. And keep in mind, this is hypothetical. It's roughly what it would represent for a developer to take on a project like this. But for this first example, there's 46 single-family homes in this Minnesota and Piat cluster. And if we did a scenario where all the homes would be for sale, affordable home ownership, meaning a developer would buy them and renovate them and work with the right organizations to have qualified and ready households, the gap would be about $30,000 a unit plus down payment assistance. If these were to be affordable rental units, not using tax credits or another program, the gap would be $60,000 a unit about. So this really led us to talk about what is the efficient approach, how can we maximize the impact of these dollars, but it also tells us that to do affordable rental housing, we really need those other sources, or we're going to exhaust the funds very quickly. But this also informed, like, if we can use these homes as renovation, we can really stretch the dollars further, provide more sustainable, affordable units over time. And so, what could this look like in a neighborhood and a focused redevelopment approach? This example here, I want to walk through what these colors mean. We have the 46 units of housing authority homes, which are listed as for sale or rental, the blue and orange dots. We have, and these are randomly placed. The green dots are, let's say we coordinate with another organization to help with home repair with existing homeowners in this quarter mile. That's a square, so it's not a radius, but radius. And then we have the yellow, they're not triangles, rectangles, which are vacant lots. So this is where, again, you could have partner organizations build new single-family homes while all this renovation is occurring. And then the red dots are properties that are currently on the roll for tax sale. And this is where the land bank can come in and support this affordable housing work. So these are 5 different approaches in a focused area that would lead to both sustaining some of the homes as affordable and providing more affordable units, but they would be very high quality, modernized and renovated units. What would this cost? The total development cost, including purchasing those homes, is $7 million. The property value in this quarter mile area would increase by $2.5 million, which would generate about $70,000 a year in new property tax revenue. And keep in mind, the housing authority homes are not on the tax rolls today, but they would be after they're sold. And in terms of the impact to the fund and what it would take to get this type of project done, it would take about $3.8 million in gap funding. And that's to do the renovation, down payment assistance, the services that are needed to set up households for success over the long term. But the revenue from the housing authority homes sales would come back to the city and back to the Affordable Housing Fund to be used on other projects. So really the net gap funding per unit is $1.8 million. And that's $25,000 per unit. And I have this up here because that is a lot of money. That is also a very good number, a low number for affordable housing, particularly this approach of doing 71 units in this kind of concentrated area. So by incorporating the housing authority homes and this more holistic thinking, we're able to do this pretty efficiently. And just a couple other notes about this area is there's a school here. There's a community center here. So it's really leveraging some existing assets to the neighborhood, and also would enable the city to think about, what infrastructure investments are we making through the CIP as all this other work is underway in the neighborhood. So this kind of thinking and analysis, I think, really helped the group talk about what should we focus on, what are the key priorities, what are the trade-offs between doing this or that. And so, we kind of, the group communicated a number of priorities to keep in mind throughout this process. Ultimately, we want to improve the condition of neighborhoods, of the core areas that have not seen the reinvestment that they've needed for decades. Another goal is to expand affordable home ownership, make sure those additional services and supports are fundamental to this program. And we have a timeline challenge with ARPA funds. They have to be expended by the end of 2026 and committed by the end of 2024. So we need to make sure that the partners who will apply for these programs can and will execute in that timeline. And there was a lot of discussion about focusing resources in targeted areas, and that's where we landed, like with that example on the quarter-mile buffer around housing authority homes. We also thought, because of some of the other elements that came to the table, we started the process just thinking about ARPA funds. But with some of Sally's work and other work going on with the city, the city received the Home ARP grant for $5.5 million for homeless housing. And then knowing that the funds from the sales of the housing authority homes will come back to the city for affordable housing, we can think about short and long-term goals and hopefully over time create some sort of sustainable fund. But we have to do it well and implement it the right way today, and use these funds to get some really successful pilot projects that have the impact that is needed. And so we talked about the types of eligible projects. These definitions are in the memos, but we want to be very clear that home repairs like up to $25,000, it's to address those needs to keep people, homeowners, in their homes. Roofs, HVAC, plumbing, just correcting those challenges that can be difficult for those on fixed incomes and other lower income situations. Renovation and rehab is the next tier up. It could be $25,000, it could be $80,000, but it's really to modernize a unit as well, where those cosmetic considerations come into play, renovating the kitchen, bathrooms, etc., in addition to the systems. And then homeowner services, I've mentioned before, but they're very important. Preparing households for success and providing support, not just with a down payment assistance or credit counseling, but along the way as well as, things break in homes, and if you haven't dealt with it before, it's challenging to find the right contractor and fix it the right way. So thinking about this holistically. We also talked through 3 options about how this would work, and I'm not going to go into details here, but it was really to talk about the trade-offs. Do we just focus on affordable home ownership, or rental, or new construction, or renovation, or all of the above? What's the impact in terms of affordability, and how can we reach the most households? And we also talked about the numerical impact as well, the different approaches. The recommendation is ultimately very flexible. And really what came out in the last couple sessions with the advisory committee is like, hey, let's not really exclude some of these good. The different approaches to affordable housing are all good. But let's let the providers and partners and the market that will make this happen, let's let them respond with some innovation and their ideas about what will work in terms of new construction, renovation, etc. So then that really informed what are the priorities of this program, and these are detailed in the recommendation. But these are, if you check all of these boxes, your project will likely get approved as long as everything else is up to standards. Projects that renovate housing authority homes, projects within that quarter-mile buffer, projects in formerly redlined areas, and for the ARPA funds, they need to be in qualified census tracts. Those that create sustainable home ownership opportunities, meaning setting those households up for long-term success. But also, what other funding sources, what's some creativity we can bring to the table? What other funding sources are people using to help actualize these programs? And then, because of the timeline, having site control in place or an option to purchase, to show that you can move forward quickly. And then, also we want to improve the quality of affordable rental housing. That's a key challenge as well. And, through all of this, we came up with a set of recommendations that the last slide really summarized some of those. But again, we're going back to leveraging the housing authority homes, You can see the location of the ones in this ECA, the Established Central Area, and the buffer where, funds would be prioritized to do that infill and home repair and other programs around those homes. We defined eligible uses, eligible users, the affordability guidelines. This is mainly single-family renovation or rehabilitation, home repair, housing services, etc., new construction as well. Eligible users would primarily be for-profit and nonprofit developers, housing service providers, nonprofits. We have some really great, strong organizations in our community already doing this work. And affordability, basically up to 80% of AMI to provide kind of a wide range of affordable housing. With rental housing, a priority would be for 50% of AMI to align with HUD programs and hopefully leverage those funds as much as possible. We talked about should they be grants or forgivable loans, and where the recommendation landed is, grants for housing services make a lot of sense, and home repair programs that would be administered by the grantee, kind of similar to some of the small business efforts that are moving forward through ARPA funding. And then we talked about forgivable loans, really to allow the city to make sure projects are going forward the way they're supposed to and prevent predatory situations. The loan would still need to be forgiven at the end of the ARPA period, but really the city is on the hook for the ARPA funds, and there are provisions where it would have to repay the funds to the treasury if the guidelines weren't followed. So these recommendations are really to allow some flexibility, but also some recourse and responsibility on the city side. And Sally's going to cover some of this, the next step of recommendations and how it would get done in a bit more detail. So I'm really going to stop there. Key conclusions: this is a unique and exciting opportunity for Wichita. Affordable housing is a critical need in the community, and thinking about providing it holistically to support neighborhood redevelopment is also very important. We have the opportunity to align this with the other efforts of what the Housing and Neighborhood Services is already doing, what planning's doing, Public Works is doing, what the Land Bank hopes to do. And really it's about improving neighborhoods and creating a more equitable community. And so that is the overview. Thank you very much for having me here, and I'm happy to discuss any questions you might have.
Could you walk me through the process real quick of how we come up with some of these numbers? Just the process of surveying people in the community. I just want to make sure that we actually are listening to the people who are going to be affected, because sometimes there are issues with the surveys not getting out to poor, people in poor communities who may not know that these surveys are going on. It would be slide 6.
To speak to this specific slide, this is based on national research and also the data from the Housing Department implementing the Emergency Rent Relief Program. That's not the right name, but for this process, we were focused on working with the advisory committee to come up with this recommendation so that something concrete could move forward for the public involvement. And that's part of the next phase that Sally will discuss. And
Councilmember, if we could go to Sally's presentation on implementation, that'll talk about how we're going to circle back with neighborhoods before we implement, so that we can get to the issue you're talking about, and is how do people know more about the program, how do we engage them, make sure that we're on the right track before we roll out all of the guidelines and start to solicit proposals.
I have one quick question. I've seen you adjust that number on gap funding a couple times, so I know you're trying to keep up with the market right now. Do you anticipate that number going down in the next year or so? I don't know if the housing market's going to cool off, but do you think that gap funding will go down?
I'm hesitant to even answer in any way. I don't think it will go down.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Maybe we come back after we talk about implementation, come back and both Andy and Sally will be available for questions. I think we may have some members of the committee too that are here and may want to speak about their recommendations and the work.
Yes, thank you. I forgot to mention that.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us today. I'm Sally Stang with the Housing and Community Services Department, bumping buttons already. So I'm actually even more excited than Bob is on this. You can imagine. This has been an incredible journey, an opportunity I don't know that I'll ever see again in my career, so we definitely want to do this right. So how did we get here? Obviously, Andy just kind of went through the background on the council, allocating $5 million in ARPA funds, engaging with development strategies, conducting research, working with the technical advisory committee. So here we are, program preparation. So we had to step back. And this crossed multiple departments within the city to say, working with housing, working with real estate office, working with planning, working with, public works, and saying, how can we look at this holistically, and what is the best strategy to move this forward? And the concept that we came up with was to reorganize the Community Investments Division of the Housing Department because of a lot of things that we already do. To hire 2 program specialists, each funded 50% from the land bank activities and the Affordable Housing Fund. Rather than having one specialist that only looks at and works on the land bank and one specialist that works only on the Affordable Housing Fund, they can work with each other, have ebbs and flows in their workflow, combine those type of activities, and then we don't have a single point of failure should somebody leave. Embed those activities within a new section within the Community Investments Division that we are calling the Real Property section. But we would have to continue to collaborate with the Planning Department and Real Estate Services, et cetera, which we do with many of the programs that we run now. So our reasoning for thinking this was possibly the best strategy was that the Housing Department has experience administering Department of Treasury funds. So we've gotten $18 million out in emergency rental assistance in the last year. We have experience issuing RFPs, developing and managing funding agreements, and monitoring programs. It's pretty much the bread and butter of what we do every day. We have existing programs that could be leveraged with these opportunities, as far as homeowner repair programs, down payment assistance, new infill development with home funds, property management, and individual and family development programs. And we can leverage those different funding streams for maximum impact without duplicating effort. So we can reduce those redundancies and make sure we're consistent across programs. So previously, our Community Investments Division was really 3 sections based on funding. We had CDBG, ESG, and home. And so it was divided based on that funding mechanism versus being divided based on the type of activities that they do. So what we're proposing is having 2 sections within the Community Investments Division, one that does public services. So you'll see that commonly in many of the programs that we fund with CDBG and ESG with our community partners. And then a real property section. This real property section, as you notice, is pretty deep there. And if you notice the colors represent different funding streams. So when you look at my department org, there's like 13 different colors on there because we have funding coming from many, many different places. But this allows us to really leverage that funding to get the maximum impact. It also provides us an opportunity to restructure where we place the public housing program. As y'all know, we closed financing on the senior properties, and that is now being managed and maintained by Mennonite Housing. Thank you very much. But we still have activities while we work to dispose of those existing single-family homes. So we need a place to land that division. But it would also provide us the opportunity to put in a program coordinator so that we don't have programs that are operating in silos, so that they're working together. Our existing rehab program, the lead grant program, which is another funding stream, but also another need in addressing lead hazards in existing housing. Obviously our public housing, our ability to use that public housing staff, that maintenance staff, to be able to manage and maintain land bank properties. Because if you acquire properties under the land bank, there's still maintenance and mowing and things that have to occur, and we have staff skilled at doing that and can leverage that. Obviously, the land bank management, as well as home fund. So this type of structure provides both support, managerial support, and support from the admin aide below to try and have them working as a whole unit towards our goal of expanding affordable housing. We also recommend having a review board. We recommend it be a 7-member review board appointed by the mayor and council that can help guide going forward projects, make recommendations of projects that should be funded. We know ARPA funds are short-term, but because of this idea of layering and leveraging within the Community Investments Division, that review board can also be used to review Community Housing Development Organization funding that we do every year. Right now, those applications come through the regular Grants Review Committee, but I'll tell you, they're very technical. You start talking to a Grants Review Committee member about a project's pro forma, right? Their development budgets versus their operational budgets. It's a complex concept that would be best suited for a group of individuals who have the experience and expertise around housing. And so we're recommending that those folks have experience in finance, housing services, construction, housing development, capacity building, community engagement, or community leaders from the focus area. So that 7-member board can serve multiple purposes, again, all along the lines of trying to have this holistic section in expanding affordable housing. In addition, the Housing Development Loan Program has no board reviewing those applications. Those applications come in, they're reviewed by staff. Again, very, very technical applications, but I like the idea of having this group of knowledgeable community members that can help make those recommendations on which projects to fund. So I have a full Gantt chart on this, on what it's going to take to get us from trying to stand it up to actually getting construction started. But I've kind of broken it out. So in the implementation phase, obviously, we need to start developing forms and procedures, hire those 2 specialists, develop the RFPs. So we're now using a cloud platform for requests for proposals. We're doing it for the first time with the ESG and CDBG funding this year. We think it's a great platform that our applicants are going to love, that they're going to be able to, and that the review committee is going to love because they can have access to those applications to score them, review them from any computer, tablet, or phone. Yes?
Sally, what if somebody doesn't have access to a computer, they don't have internet access?
They're not going to be putting in applications for these complicated jobs. This is not for the end user. Okay. These are for our developer partners.
Thank you. Sorry, I got confused.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
Definitely. Not a problem. Not a problem. So yeah, it's only our developer partners or our housing services partners that would be putting in their requests for proposals, not the end users or the end receivers of the affordable housing. We also have to develop consistent inspection and scope standards for projects. For communication, So, once we leave this meeting today, of course, with guidance, it's going to really guide what direction we would take, but, our idea would be to go back out to the DABs and present on this concept, go out to neighborhood association meetings, particularly in those areas where we're looking at pilot projects or focus areas, make sure that those folks know that this is a proposed, at this point, it's still a proposed program. Publicize our recommendations, not just social media, but DAB newsletters and through our partners in the community to get information out. We need to obtain that feedback and adjust our recommendation. At this point, it is still just a recommendation. Once that all comes back, we would then be prepping the agenda report, getting with law to draft that enabling ordinance, and bring the program and committee recommendations back to the council for approval. Beyond that, once approved, obviously, we need to issue RFPs, publicize those RFPs, present those, any applications we receive to the committee. We need to develop contracts, loan agreements, property documents, present every project would be coming back to the council for approval. And then beyond that, our favorite world, there's always the reporting, monitoring, and oversight, and depending on the project, you're going to have monthly invoices, quarterly reports, and possibly even on-site monitoring, similar to what we do for our federal grant programs. So that would be ongoing. Now I wanted to link back to how we see we can use the single-family homes of the Wichita Housing Authority. So I do have a link to an updated map. Dunk. There we go. So some people have seen this map before. Every icon on the map represents a different grouping of properties. And so for example, that Minnesota Ash Piat group is up here. And you'll notice the numbers represent the number of bedrooms in each unit, okay? So we have these.
Sally, would you show the other area, Haskell?
Sure, Haskell and St. Clair is down here. This here is Haskell and St. Clair. The other thing is this map is nice too because you can turn it on and get the satellite image so that we can see where we have properties in clusters where we can do that whole idea of the targeted investment. We've done a lot of rehab, we've done infill development, but I've always said it's the shotgun approach. It's one here, one there, one there. And we really don't see that those activities help to lift up whole neighborhoods. We don't see that synergy raising property values. I know it sounds really crazy to say, why would you want to raise property values when we're talking about affordable housing? Well, it's about filling that gap. It costs more to build a house than it's worth, right? And properties can still be affordable, but yet still see families get that generational wealth development. People invest in their house as their means, that's their major wealth, their major investment. We want to see those home values increasing, not in great jumps, but increasing over time. And we believe with these targeted approaches, being able to do renovation on a cluster of 23 properties here, but also wrap around doing homeowner repair to properties within a quarter mile of this area, having our conversations with Public Works about what are upcoming CIP projects and how can we leverage that, working with some of our partners like the Health Foundation and about how do we improve the determinants of health in these particular areas. So a really targeted approach. This is the side of it that gets me all jazzed going. It's very exciting. But we've now taken a closer look at all of the properties. And the ones with the dollar signs are ones that I'm recommending that we just go out and put on the market, put them on the MLS. Either they're outside the qualified census tract or they're so scattered that you're not going to get any synergies around building up a neighborhood. So just put them out on the open market. Let's go ahead and sell those, have those proceeds go back to fund the Affordable Housing Fund. with the exception, and pay off any expenses related to the sale or the pre-development expenses related to the RAD project that didn't go.
Excuse me, Sally?
Uh-huh.
Are we going to be rehabbing those houses first, restoring them at all?
In this
or just-
case, these ones that I have dollar signs on are generally in pretty decent condition. These are ones we're saying, no, just put them on let the market take these. There's about 34 of them in total, and let them go in the condition they're in. Yeah. The next grouping, obviously, would be anything that's with the blue icons. These are ones that could be eligible for the Affordable Housing Fund. They do have synergies because there's a larger cluster where you could come into neighborhoods and have a project that really helps to build. Get those we look to be putting out in joint RFP with Affordable Housing Funds as a possible funding alternative. Now, the red ones, though, which we still have a few to update with the bedroom sizes here, these properties, they do have significant structural damage, and I've tossed this around in my head over and over again on what to do with these properties. Significant structural damage, the properties are within the floodplain, which causes additional challenges, and is actually part of the reason they have structural damage. Our newest thought on this is still, let's put them out for the RFP, but with specific stipulations that any structural damage we've identified would have to be included in the proposal coming back. We don't want to put these out, have a developer come in, buy it, put $10,000 worth of work, and try and sell it to somebody as a quality affordable house when we know it's not. So we said, let's take a run at this. We talked about, these are the ones where in the past I said, well, maybe we should go demo. Maybe we should just demo them, mitigate the risk of someone doing some bad activity. But we decided, that's a real challenge to this particular neighborhood. That's a lot. They're not close enough together where you can create a parcel that you could try and lift out of the floodplain. That would be a lot of vacant land in the neighborhood. So let's at least put them out, see if there's an appetite for someone who's willing to come in and do the work that's necessary to make them quality affordable housing.
Sally, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
What percentage of the money would actually go back into fund? I mean, I think the city sometimes will charge like a 10% administrative fee or something. Is the rest of it going to remain in there, or do we have any idea what that would look like?
From the sale of the
from the
sale.
disposition of
So
some of these.
HUD won't let us pay a fee more than market. So if the seller's sales commission's 3%, and the buyers is 3%, 6% is the max HUD's going to allow to come out for closing cost, for sales commission.
Yeah, I guess I'm
Yeah.
asking specifically about any revenue that goes into the fund.
So we have to ask with each application to HUD permission for what it is we want to do with the proceeds that come back. So we do have some expenses we have a loan for the expenses for preparing this project for the RAD project that failed. Our first request from the sale, the first grouping of homes, is going to be to pay that off. Otherwise, we have to come up with the money somewhere else to pay off that loan. The second request is for everything beyond closing costs coming back to the Affordable Housing Fund.
How about like the rental assistance program that's been out there? Do we know what percentage of that has actually went out to renters versus what's been stayed either within administrative cost or maybe went out to another department or something, or is it all stayed in there?
For the rental assistance
Yeah.
program, for round one funding, only 10% could be kept for administration costs, so 90% of the money.
Everything else is going directly back out to home, or back out to renters?
Right.
Okay.
Right. In round two, they actually changed it to 15% for admin and 10% for housing stability services. So it really can vary. So it's up to 25%.
What was the 10% for?
So the first phase of rental assistance funding, it was capped at 10% for admin. The second phase that came out under ARPA, it's 15% for admin and an additional 10% for housing stability services. So 75% of the round two money is directly for rental.
What else, the housing?
Housing stability services can be assisting clients to move from a deteriorated home, or if they were evicted during the process, to help them find a new home. The staff, case management services, security deposits, other things that would be required to get them stably housed.
So that 15% should be going back out to a renter?
The 15% is
The
for,
additional 10% rather.
the additional 10%
Yeah.
is for case
The
management
city should not be
services.
retaining over 15%.
No, no,
Okay.
no.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And we are actually, I think as of this week, going to have all of 1 and 2 expended. So we did get some additional reallocated funds allocated to us, and we're now entertaining a request from the state to take some of their money. So we're doing pretty well on the rental assistance world. So yeah, so the funds coming back, HUD has to approve what they can be used for. We believe requesting that they go into the Affordable Housing Fund is something that they will approve. But each application they review individually. But like I said, these are a challenging group of properties simply because we know they have significant needs. Now, if we put this out and we don't get any proposals back willing to put in the work that's required, then we may have to reevaluate whether they need to be demolished or something else. But at least let's give the opportunity. Then we have a group of homes actually out here. This is Country Acres. This grouping of, I think there's 45. These are outside the ECA. They're also outside the QCT. However, there's such a cluster that there's a lot of interest. This is a really viable project on its own that we're recommending that they go out for RFP, but they will be separate because they're not eligible for affordable housing funds. Then the last grouping is green, down here. These are down in South City. Our recommendation here, because we do still have about $1.5 million in capital funds, our recommendation for this grouping of homes is for us to rehabilitate them, convert them under Section 32 home ownership, use our family self-sufficiency and individual family development program to sell them for affordable home ownership. If we were to sell them before expending the capital funds, we'd have to give the capital funds back to HUD, so we might as well spend them on the properties, is our thoughts on this. It is a work in progress, the map. We're meeting weekly to continue to reevaluate. Back in May of 2021, HUD put together a national panel of experts on repositioning that met with us to discuss the challenges related to these single-family homes. Following that, they awarded us actually a technical assistance grant for a consultant to work with us in submitting these applications. And so we have had that grant or that technical assistance in place since about August. But knowing this, we were in the middle, starting to put this together, we said, let's get through the Affordable Housing Fund, and then we can try and strategize the best series of requests for the disposition of these properties. So it does, seeing them on a map kind of says a lot as we work with them. So this kind of summarizes what I talked about with the map. So the group ones were indicated by the dollar signs. There's 34 homes. They have a 2021 assessed value just under $2.5 million. So our request would be under Section 18, request disposition just by placing them on the MLS, with the net proceeds to pay for pre-development expenses and the remaining to the Affordable Housing Fund. Group 2, RFPs through the Affordable Housing Fund. Those 2 pilot projects, Haskell and St. Clair, and Minnesota Piatt Ash, that groups, they would receive additional preference points for applications on the RFP, but we're looking at about $4 million in value based on the 2021 assessed value that could be coming back. So these pilot programs would be leveraged with the Affordable Housing Fund homeowner repair, infill development, and housing services within a quarter mile of those. And they would be affordable home ownership or rental with a land use restriction. I don't think Andy touched on that. One of the requirements that came from the committee was if we're going to do affordable rental, it has to be partnered with an official program, meaning either project-based vouchers, tax credits, something that creates a land use restriction beyond 2026, right? And in doing so, we know that we're going to have a long-term affordable rental, not just a short-term one. Group 2 continued. Obviously, the units outside, the units within the remaining units within the qualified census tracts that could go with affordable housing funds at just under 5.5 million. The floodplain units, there's 20 of them with an assessed value, of just over 535,000. And then group 3 are those ones outside the QCT and the central district with a value of just over 2 million, would go out on a separate RFP. The other thing about those units in the floodplain, they're not eligible for HUD funding, which is going to make it even more challenging for a developer to come in. Because it's in a 100-year floodplain, HUD won't let us invest additional dollars in them. So, something to take into consideration. And then the last grouping, like I said, are those public housing, rehab and sale, 45 homes down in South City, little 4.4 million that we would turn around, rehab and sell. We could see this actually increase because the assessed value is likely to increase after the rehab. So there's a summary of the groups and the 2021 assessed value. I don't lay a lot of stock on that 2021 assessed value, to be honest with you, because they don't put a lot of effort into the appraisals when we don't pay regular property taxes. We do pay pilot, but it's not based on the appraised value, so we don't see the appraisers putting a lot of work into our assessments. HUD will require any sale that we have a formal appraisal within the last year, and anything sold for that meets the requirements or meets the appraisal doesn't have a HUD restriction on it. Doesn't mean the city can't apply its own use restriction on the property. So that's kind of sums up where we think we should head in structuring both the Land Bank Administration and the Affordable Housing Fund within the Housing Department, leveraging other activities, moving forward with the Affordable Housing Plan as recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee. So I'll stand for any questions. I'm sure Andy will too. Did you want to give the members of the advisory board an opportunity to speak? Is Valerie on remotely? Because I thought she was going to.
I think we have Councilmember Fry who want to jump at the question, I think, for you before we pass the floor off to someone else.
Thank you. On this slide, Sally, of the 352 homes, none of them are paying property taxes now.
We pay pilot.
We pay pilot.
Yes.
Who pays that?
The housing program pays it from the rent. So they have to pay 10% of the rent less utilities.
But if we put these back into publics for sale,
They'll be, yes,
that'd be full value.
full property taxes.
Have we
But
done?
I shouldn't say that. There is a possibility that if you have a nonprofit come in and do like an affordable rental project, they could apply for tax exemption. So I can't guarantee it, but.
Right. Have we done any kind of calculations on what that could be or
without
projections?
having a true assessed value, that's going to be a challenge. Because like I said, I believe this number is to be significantly understated, just based on seeing what properties are selling in these different areas.
Is there an opportunity to take some of those floodplain unit lots out of the floodplain, or?
Yeah, that's a challenge. We have talked about that, what type of activities would have to. We've done it. We've actually done it, which was funny. Let me show you on the map. When I first saw this map, I'm like, how do we have one unit in the rest of them that's out of the floodplain? And so, see this one right here? That is technically out of the floodplain. It burned down in 1996, and when they rebuilt it, they built it up and out of the floodplain. But what did that do? It actually caused more flooding issues to the neighbors. So, it would really have to be like an Army Corps of Engineers type project to come in to see what would have to happen to divert significant amounts of water out of this area, or you're going to be causing more headache to other people.
I guess my feedback is I'd just be very careful doing developments or improvements on something that, if there's no way we can ever get it out of the
Right.
floodplain.
Well, and that was why my first instinct was, we're going to have to demo them.
Yeah.
Right? But then I'm like, well, let's not just close the door. Do I think we're going to end up there on some? Maybe not all. Probably, honestly.
So to Councilmember Blueball's point, I was gonna raise, and I don't wanna put Scott on the spot, because Gary's not here, but there's a project we've talked about on 9th and Hillside that could potentially remove all of that from the floodplain, but I just don't know where we're at on that. If you don't know, it's fine. I just know we had talked about it. So if that happens, it would, my understanding of the conversation we had is that whole area would be removed from the floodplain. So would that make this process a lot easier?
It would. I mean, unfortunately, the properties have significant structural damage the way they are right now. The property we were in just a couple of weeks ago was like, you looked at the wall, you're like, oh my gosh, let's get out of here because this could cave at any moment. You could totally see the splits down the side. Taking it out of the floodplain doesn't help its condition, but it does mean you could get some further investment. That particular house, we're gonna end up taking down for sure. But it could help revitalize the area because you could get more federal money invested in the area if it wasn't in the floodplain. Yep.
There's a lot of concern in my district about the number of rentals, the percent of houses that are rentals as opposed to homeowners. Is there a process to press for affordable home ownership as opposed to it going to landlords or people who are going to rent the houses out?
Absolutely.
Sally, you may want to go to the, if you go back to the properties on the south.
Oh, go take a look at South
East.
City?
South
Yeah.
City?
Yep. Because I think you referenced that.
Yeah. This, I mean, our plan here was Section 32 homeownership all the way, which is Section 32 of the Housing Act. It's just the provisions for converting public housing straight to homeownership. The challenge, especially when we're talking about not just this activity, some additional infill development, other infill that's happening, are we going to have enough homeowners ready to be mortgageable to be able to do this? And then we also have to address the fact that we do need quality rentals. And by leveraging and making sure that they either have tax credits or project-based vouchers or something helps us to ensure that it's just not a slumlord that's going to, never do repairs because we're actually in there being able to do inspections and things. So there is a need. That's a whole swath of people who can't afford homeownership, and we can't just ignore the need that we need to have quality housing for them too.
Is there an opportunity for a deed restriction on those properties? You
Yes.
know, whenever you put HUD foreclosures out there on the market, there's a 2-year period that only owner occupants can buy them and occupy them. Is that something we could potentially look at some of these?
We could definitely potentially look at that. And when I talked about if they sell for appraised value, there's no HUD restriction, I'd still recommend that we're putting on our own city use deed restriction on there, especially if it's a rental property. We want to make sure we're going to get it for the long term. Home ownership, it gets a little challenging. It's easy to make sure that first homeowner is qualified. It can be challenging when now you have someone who came through an affordable housing program for home ownership, and you're like, nope, you can only, you can only sell to another qualified buyer. Sometimes can really trap a homeowner in their property, and so it's not impossible to put longer use periods in home ownership. It's definitely more challenging than rental.
Yeah, I was only
Yep.
suggesting
The first time out. Yeah. We also don't want to all of a sudden rehab a bunch of properties and have them sit vacant because we can't find homeowners. So to have a rental option where we have some control, and that's what happens, for example, in the home program. In the home program, you can have the greatest program. You're going to build all these single-family homes. If they don't sell in 9 months, you have to go to rental for at least a 1-year period, and then you can circle back and try and sell them again. Because they don't want a bunch of completed houses sitting vacant because they get vandalized.
This may be a good time to go to Valerie if she is on, because the committee did spend a lot of time talking about this issue of home ownership versus rental, and their recommendations are reflective of that discussion.
So I do see Valerie is on. We're kicking it to you,
Hello.
Valerie.
Hi, my name is Valerie Black, and I'm an employee of the Kansas Health Foundation. It was a pleasure to be a part of this committee. I was at every meeting. Everything that we recommended matches what's in the presentation. We do understand that home ownership is key, but like Sally said, there are some folks who may not be at that place to be homeowners. But everything that's been presented today matches what we recommend, and we hope that it will be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Valerie. Is there any other members of the committee that wanted to say something?
I just want to say one other thing on the homeownership. You know, a lot of times, again, with the HUD foreclosures, at least during the initial 30 days, they open it up to owner occupants first within what they're willing to accept. So just throwing out different ideas as to how we can truly get them to homeowners.
Yeah, that's one of our biggest challenges, though, but that's also about the housing services, why we said, if we're going to head down this path, and I said, I get really busy tomorrow or later today after we get, feedback from you, it's about how do we identify those who we can make ready, right? And because we're going to have this time period where there's activity going on, construction going on, to try and get those families ready as best we can. Some are going to take more than 9-12 months, but there are going to be others that we could really start working with right away to get them ready for homeownership.
Gary Schmidt has been working with the Land Bank Committee, or the Board of Trustees, I'm sorry. Gary, I don't know if you want to make any comments regarding the Land Bank's coordination.
I just think this is a great opportunity.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Council. I just think this is a great opportunity for all the different agencies in the city and also outside the community, the not-for-profits, and even the developers, the for-profits, an opportunity to work together to improve affordable housing in our community. There's a great need. I know Sally's got a lot of great ideas. I really like the idea, too, of the grants and the money available a quarter mile around some of these properties to improve the neighborhoods. Because people move into areas they want to move into. Even affordable housing homeowners look at neighborhoods and say, is this the type of neighborhood that I want to raise my family? And I'm hoping that those dollars will improve those neighborhoods. If I have a house next door down the street, if I can get a small grant to do some improvements, all of a sudden that brings up the whole neighborhood. So I think this is a great opportunity. The federal government's given us the ability with some cash. We have some existing housing stock that we need to do some changes with, get rid of it, put it on the market. I think great opportunity. So Sally's done a great job, and I appreciate everything you can do to help us move this whole issue forward, because I do think there's a huge need in our community. So thank you.
I appreciate your comments, Gary. And a lot of times as a realtor, we describe certain pockets of Wichita as a street-by-street area. Basically, one street looks good, the next doesn't. So I think the quarter of a mile really adds to that, like you said.
Ann, I saw your hand up. Did you want to?
Sure.
I saw your hand. And also participated on our technical advisory committee.
Commissioners, I just want to say I am so grateful that the time has been allowed to be invested in preparing this proposal. I'm on the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. Remember, the city's plan to 235 is to try to promote infill development. I have some experience in that, and I think the focused concept is really, really important. If you try to promote home ownership in an area that's where the value of the property isn't going to be maintained, then you're not doing anything for generational wealth for that homeowner. So by uplifting a concentrated area, I think you have a much better chance of helping people to become more financially independent. I also really appreciate that services are a part of this. Most first-time home buyers who have never had an experience of living in a home that was owned by another need a lot of support to understand the importance of prioritizing their mortgage payment, how to maintain a positive credit score, and then the basic home maintenance things that they would typically send to a landlord. So I feel like this package really looks at all those components. making it really wise and really sustainable through the inclusion of the formerly occupied homes. And then that there's a timeline is really great too, because we want to get the boarded up vacants that used to be public housing units to get back in production before they decay further. So thanks for your consideration of this proposal and the recommendation of the committee.
So we have a lot of people to answer questions if you want additional information. We also want to know if we're on the right track, because the next step is to engage and get out to the DABs and to neighborhood associations. So what do you need from us?
No, take this, push that down in, see if that works.
We're having a great day with Spark.
Yeah, technology is not our friend today. Thank you so much. Now all at once. I just would make the recommendation that I can't speak for any other council member, obviously, but when you come to my district advisory board, housing is very complicated. And it's something that not all of my district advisory boards have had a lot of experience working in. And so if we can make it very user-friendly so that they can provide meaningful input, try and eliminate as many acronyms as possible, not use a lot of housing terminology. You know, I always try and say, I think I can explain things well when I could explain it to my neighbor at the mailbox. And so that I know would be very helpful, because then we'll get the most meaningful and thoughtful input from our community. So anything you can do to make it user-friendly would be very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
So I would say that I think that we are definitely on the right track. District 1 has a lot of examples of where this works, from the Power CDC neighborhood that's adjacent to the Northeast Mill neighborhood, where Power CDC built multiple houses in there. This area, if it were to develop the focused approach like we see with the Rock the Block area, that whole area has changed between 9th and 13th, Grove and Hillside. And one of the things that we continue to hear, and I still hear from residents, is that outside of the new builds, what is the assistance that's available for folks to rehab their houses? So I think all of this is definitely on the right track. The focused approach helps. And I think we get a lot of impact out of that. And for sure, Northeast Mill-Air and Matlock Heights would be excited about that, because that's what we keep hearing about the housing there. So I think this is great work. I appreciate everybody's work, Sally, always, and committee. So I'm definitely supportive of the direction this is going.
Yeah, I just want to add that I love how not just DABs are being engaged, but also neighborhood associations. As someone who's been involved in my neighborhood association for years, it is one of the top things I think people who come to the neighborhood association talk about is houses that are in disrepair, and really folks have in-depth knowledge about what we could be doing to help rehab some houses. So I think it's really good that we want to pull in those neighborhood associations into this process, and also lean on them for better guidance and information on how we can get the most out of these funds. So I just wanted to add that. I think a lot of times the focus has been on outreach, utilizing DAB boards, and also with our social media reach as well. Those are great, but also including our neighbor associations, I think is going to be just an even better result.
Hopefully through this process, you're speaking with some brokers or some professionals about, as we talk about the home ownership and what the demand is for some of these areas, and see what is selling, or are they staying on the market. For example, just shooting from the hip there, the Haskell and St. Clair area, I would think that those areas are probably in demand, and I wouldn't know, I just think you should take that into effect before we look at how much we're going to do the properties and stuff. Maybe it is market ready, or would take less to get market ready versus some of the other properties where the neighborhoods, as we said, once homeowners own it, we don't want their value to actually decline. And I think we've kind of had some discussions about that, where you go and fix up a property and nobody else in the neighborhood has done so, and they're really not getting the resale value that we want. I just want to make sure we're looking at the holistic picture and try to make some predictions about the future value of those properties as well.
I could add two more things since you asked for. Just given recent events, I would just want to make sure, I know we already stressed it, but that rehabs are truly quality, that the developer or individual would live in themselves with their family and not just this is good enough for you all. That's important to me. And then lastly, I've talked with the city manager a little bit about this, but maybe considering some type of effort that looks at the property tax on the new builds in certain, I think you said qualified census tracts that might freeze that property tax for 5 years or so for the actual homeowner that purchases it and maybe escalates over a couple of years after that. That could be some savings for that homeowner, but I think something like that, if we work with our partners at the county and school district, could be beneficial to attract new homeowners in those areas. I know that we used to have a program like that when we talked, but I don't know if
I understand that. It's probably more of a marketing issue than it is actual help in this regard. Andy had a slide at the very beginning of his presentation that showed the impact that would have and on the gap, and it's really insignificant. It's the gap financing that we're going to provide through the housing fund that will make the difference, and it'll actually get them to a point where they have an affordable mortgage or an affordable house.
Okay.
And,
To further on Councilmember Johnson's comments, some of the feedback I've received from the development committee over the last few years of the developers, dump fees, building costs, stuff like that. A lot of people from the public say, we want more developmental infill. Well, I think we have to make it attractive to get them in there versus having them develop out in the suburbs.
Andy, would you call that slide up again?
Thank you. We did some math on that we also looked at a multifamily project in that prior presentation. Like in this example, the building permit fee waiver is $1,500. The tap fee kind of depends. For infill in the most challenged market neighborhoods, those don't move the needle to attract a developer, in my experience in other communities. They could be part of the mix on a particular proposal where it's like that last bit to get a project over the financial hump. But usually that in and of itself is not the incentive that you lead with to get this type of development accomplished.
So I just want to add a comment to, in support of Councilmember Johnson's comment as well. I'm hoping we can have some perhaps clawback provisions if we contract out and the work comes back and it's not as up to standards. Can we ensure that we have a mechanism where we can claw that money back as an incentive for developers to make some of these rehabs not only up to standards, but also if we have to add additional work that's unbudgeted, we'll have a funding source to fix any problems that might not have been fixed.
That's pretty much how our programs work now. So, that's one of the benefits of landing this program where we are, is we have those type of conditions. We only pay out on new builds periodically, and that's based on after inspection and making sure that things are where they're supposed to be. We don't pre-fund their construction for those very reasons. But then we also, that was part of the reason why we looked at forgivable loans on these two, to give us the ability for clawback provisions if they don't meet all of the requirements. Any other questions? Comments? All right.
Well, Mayor, I want to thank all of the committee members that gave time to get us to this point. Andy and his team, and all of the city employees that have been involved in this. Of course, Sally and Scott Rigby, Scott Wadle, and Scott Wadle's staff members have been involved as well, including Mary Hunt. So again, my thanks to everyone that has gotten us to this point. We'll start the public engagement process then based on the comments that we've received. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there any further discussion? If there's not, then we are done. Thank you, everyone.